We're in day 3 of the Micheal Brelo trial, the Cleveland police officer charged with 2 counts of manslaughter in the deaths of Melissa Williams and Timothy Russell in 2012 after a high-speed chase involving something like 100 patrol cars and then 13 police officers who fired 137 rounds into their vehicle after it was stopped in East Cleveland. The only person who has been charged with criminal violations was Micheal Brelo. That trial got underway on Monday. It's being heavily covered on cleveland.com. We have a reporter live blogging it. But today we had new revelations about issues of use of force, and that was the surfacing of a video from a North Charleston, from the community of North Charleston in South Carolina, showing a police officer firing at the back of a fleeing suspect after a traffic stop. The video prompted the community to file murder charges against that police officer, which perhaps is indicative of new approaches or new attitudes toward such cases, though we will see whether juries are inclined to convict, starting with the Brelo trial, which we're going to talk about on today's opinion show. I'm Elizabeth Sullivan. I direct the editorial board for The Plain Dealer in the Northeast Ohio Media Group, and I'm joined by editorial writers Sharon Broussard, Chris Evans, and Pete Krouse. And so I guess I'm going to ask Pete if you could just kind of fill us in quickly on where we stand with the Brelo case, what are the issues in that trial, and you know, your thoughts about the video as well from North.
Well, the Brelo trial, as you mentioned, it's day 3. The officer, I believe he's 31 years old, has been charged with, I believe it's 2 counts of manslaughter. Basically, what the prosecution is saying is that he went kind of out of control after these 2 people were stopped following this high-speed chase, which began in downtown Cleveland, ended in East Cleveland. He, according to what we've reported previously in testimony, he got out of his car, jumped on a police car, apparently jumped on the hood of the Malibu that the 2 were riding in, fired downward through the windshield. According to the police, those were the bullets. Those were that killed the 2 suspects. I think the Brelo's defense attorneys will argue that you know, how can you show that, and that's probably going to be where a lot of this turns. So that's what's going on right now, and they're gonna have to determine whether or not, you know, he acted inappropriately.
But isn't one of his key defenses that he thought his life was in jeopardy? The testimony so far has asserted, you know, many times that, you know, they thought shots were fired, that's what prompted the high-speed chase, and
right,
but
it wasn't not just his life, but the life of his fellow officers. I mean, my feeling is that the whole Brelo trial is much ado about nothing. I don't think the prosecution has a chance of proving that Micheal Brelo fired the shots that killed Melissa Williams or Timothy Russell.
Now, they say, though, that they have forensics that can distinguish which rounds came from which officer's gun, and that the
casings,
angle,
but not necessarily the bullets.
yeah, okay, and that the angle of the shots makes it clear which ones came from, you know, Micheal Brelo's gun, and that he was the officer who fired 13 of the last 15 shots, and at least the prosecutor asserted in her opening statement that they believe that those were the shots, the ones that fired from above that killed both victims. Sharon, what are your thoughts about this?
My thoughts was that, I mean, basically it's like shooting ducks in a pond or something. I mean, everybody was firing at these people, or most of the officers were. And just to then blame it on, you know, a guy who leapt onto the hood of the car and fired the last, you know, rounds, I just don't think that that's fair, or that that's actually what happened. They could have been dead before. I don't know. I think there's a lot of responsibility going around here, but then it falls on one guy who did the most spectacular act of them all, and I'm not sure that that's where the blame should be placed, as opposed to the whole system going totally wrong.
It was kind of like a mob. It was a mob mentality almost that took over, only that instead of, you know, being crazy kids, they were the police, and Brelo was the one who kind of took it to the farthest extent. But I think Sharon's right, and Chris too. I don't see how they're going to be able to prove that his actions are the ones that took the lives of these two.
Right, I think that, yeah, I mean,
these two people.
fatal shots would have been fired before that. I think the brief that the attorney, that the county attorney filed last week, accusing the police of being hostile witnesses, refusing to testify. I mean, there's lots of exclamation points, and this has never happened before. You know, it's his attempt to, you know, somehow bolster his case. But I think when you get right down to it, the fact that he can prove, the prosecution can prove that Micheal Brelo was responsible for the death of these two unarmed suspects, he can't do it.
Well, what about this blue wall of silence, if you will, that the prosecutor McGinty highlighted when he said he was going to be treating the police officers as hostile witnesses? Is that, I mean, that when you read the Justice Department's report from last December about use of excessive force by the Cleveland Police Department, this was one of the issues, a failure to report, a failure to step forward and point fingers, a failure to hold police officers accountable when they did fire their weapons, failure to document. These were all highlighted by the Justice Department.
But I think that gets to DeWine's point, the state attorney general, that it's a systemic problem. It isn't one person, it isn't Micheal Brelo or these other 12 officers or the other officers that were involved in this, whatever it was, 60-car chase. There is a systemic failure in the police department, and it goes right to the top. And I think this is just another attempt to deflect attention away from the real problem.
Yeah, the problem here is not so much how it ended, although that's where the tragedy occurred, it's how it began. And that's where the mistakes began and then were compounded by this chase and this, like I say, this kind of mob mentality that took over among the police, that they were going to stop these people.
Well, let's talk about that, though, because those were the two first police officers who testified in the trial, were the ones at the outset of the chase. The first one talked about how he saw, you know, their car surrounded by people. You know, it was fairly evident to him they were, you know, conducting a drug deal. When he attempted to come and stop them and arrest them, they took off. So, you know, they were suspects in a crime at that point. Then, as they passed the Justice Department, the Justice Center, there's a big backfire, as we believe, but that's what caused the report to go out on the radio of shots fired.
Right.
So that is, you know, what people believed as they were pursuing, and there's, you know, even though they never found a weapon at the end of this chase, they cannot assert 100% that a weapon wasn't thrown out of the vehicle. And the Attorney General's own investigation said that, you know, they saw them holding things during the chase. Numbers of police officers did. So.
Right, but I think where the whole thing started to fall apart was that with that initial stop, where the officer had pulled the car over, apparently had heard cursing or something inside the car, pulled the car over, the car took off, but the officer never reported that.
Well, the officer decided not to follow. He felt like it would be.
He didn't realize that that was the car involved in the chase, is what he testified this week. And the car, he didn't pull it over. He witnessed what he thought was a drug deal. He approached the car. They started swearing at him. This is his testimony, anyway. They started swearing at him and took off.
And then the car went past the Justice Center at a high rate of speed, which is where the backfire occurred. The officer testified that he had heard I think it was a man. This was a gunshot, and that was reported as such. And then things carried on. But still, even if it was a gunshot, you know, you don't necessarily go after them with 60 cars the way they
traveling at over 100 miles an hour.
But you know, but the thing is you know, the fact that we had that. Well, this is getting onto another subject, but I was going to say the fact that, you know, all our police officers are armed, that you know they, if they're going to go after them and they're going to confront them, there's a good chance that a weapon is going to be fired, because that's the way our system works.
But now, you suggested, Chris, that this was an attempt to deflect, prosecuting Brelo was an attempt to deflect attention away from the fact that the Cleveland Police Department needs reform, although it's hard to deflect attention away from that, given the fact that the Justice Department is demanding a consent decree, an independent monitor, major changes. And in fact, the public perception is that in most cases like this, because of the wall of silence, that police officers aren't held accountable criminally for their conduct. And the prosecutors seem to think that they've got a case. And what we saw in North Charleston this morning was a decision immediately to prosecute on murder charges for that officer's actions.
I think that's apples and oranges. I mean, in that case, it was so egregious. It looks as if the officer from that videotape, instead of the traditional drop gun, did the drop taser, which is probably the new age that we're in. I think in terms of deflecting attention away from what the Justice Department and the consent decree situation, Jackson can stand up with McGinty and say, we are doing something. We are holding people accountable. We will not let our officers misuse deadly force. And I don't think that really gets to the root of the problem.
One thing that may come out, though, in testimony is evidence about what the prosecutor alleges, this blue wall of silence, this attempt to cover up, the attempt to silence those police officers who had misgivings about what happened that evening. Sharon, do you think there could be something really worthwhile that would come out of this trial?
I'm not so sure, because I don't think that they're going about it the right way with tackling Brelo. But I will say about the wall of silence, it's not just a Cleveland thing. I mean, it's a national, you could probably argue, international thing that happens among cops and maybe militiamen and other people who are, in charge of the public safety, and then somehow take it too far, but feel that they're still the good guys, so why should I, rat on somebody for that? What will be interesting to me, though, is to watch that Southern Carolina case and just kind of see how much impact does having the video make from what we can parse from the video, because it doesn't start from the beginning, I'm sure. Right. So there might be things that are missing compared to this situation where it ends up in East Cleveland. There is no video. Right. There's just a testimony of the various officers, some of them who are doing so unwillingly, and there's a lot of room for doubt and a lot of what proceeds.
To that end, I think the use of the dash cam videos and the lapel videos, the cameras, that could make a difference in that regard. But I think I agree. I don't think much is going to come out of this trial. This problem is really never going to be solved as long as we have a gun culture. As long as we have so many guns out there, and our police are basically militarized. This is going to continue to happen. It may get a little better here, a little better there. You could add some more training in, that kind of thing. But as long as it's guns versus guns, police are going to fear for their lives. There's going to be shootings, and this is, this will always be with us.
Right.
These kinds of incidents.
And I think, the police have a right to be fearful, and I think most of the officers on the police force are professionals and want to do the right thing. But they read the newspapers, they see the news too, and there are too many incidents where a simple stop turns into a shooting.
And, I've covered county courts, and I've covered trials in which police officers were defendants. I've never yet seen a jury convict a police officer in a case maybe not like this, but it's possible that perhaps the context has changed, that society's thoughts about how to draw the line about police officers who admittedly every day they get up, they understand that they are going to be facing jeopardy.
Right. They're targets.
Yeah.
But this is a bench trial, so it'll be interesting. I mean, it really rests upon the judge.
That's true.
And of course, judges are elected.
And this was the police officer's request that it be trial. So he obviously felt he had a better chance with a judge than with a jury, which maybe speaks to that.
One other quick point. I was doing some reading on before this, and several countries don't arm their police, or much less than we do. England, Ireland,
that's the country
New Zealand, some other places, and the number of police shootings obviously is extremely low. I mean extremely low, and.
Well, if you're not armed, how do you shoot?
Well, no, that's true, but also their crime levels. Like Ireland's maybe 25% of their police, I think, are armed, and their crime rates are much lower than they
Right.
are now. Now, it's a different
That's what I was
society, they're
saying,
more
we have a
homogeneous,
totally different
lot more to it than that, but just a thought.
That's going to have to be a subject for another opinion show. We want to thank you for watching today. Tune in the next time, and we would like to hear your comments about what you think about the Brelo trial, about what happened in North Charleston over the weekend that we saw the video of earlier today. Thank you.